It's weird. There's an interesting delay.
Wow, okay.
All right. Good morning, guys. I'm going to give it just a second. So our guest, Mr. Tyler Lee, is looks like he's popping in now. Although he's going to just be audio for today. Cool. All right. So welcome to the first G.I. Joe 3D printing podcast. So Artwan and I started the G.I. Joe 3D printing group August of last year. It was mid-COVID. I had some free time on my hand, and I started posting stuff online, and so that's how I met Artwan, and we talked about it and decided there was enough people that were kind of into this that we really should have our own Facebook page. So we started that up, and I think we're up to almost 2,000 members, which is impressive.
Yes.
But going through and accepting the request to join the group, like most of the people at least say that they're interested in getting into 3D printing and haven't yet. So I think like last week or the week before, I just thought, man, we should do like a genuine, here's how to kind of get into the hobby, something. So that's where this came from.
Right.
So we're hoping to go for about an hour. We've got kind of a tentative schedule for the next couple of months. This is just going to be a once a month thing. I know I'm pretty busy, so if we decide we want to do more, we'll do more. But for now, we're gonna just kind of stick with the once a month. But we'll be going over intro to 3D design. We'll be going over vehicles, figures, reproduction parts, and then possibly maybe some mold making and casting kind of down the road a bit, because that's fun too. So quick introduction. So I'm Mark. So again, one of the founders of the G.I. Joe 3D printing group. Lifelong G.I. Joe fan. I'm a 3D artist. I'm the guy that does the Mark II design stuff, and I'm the current weapons modeler for Action Force.
Right. And I'm Artwan. I keep it short. Most people can remember me by Juan. But in the groups, obviously, I'm Artwan. I sort of helped co-found the 3D printing group, and got into it really because I'm like a 3D parts designer, and so that's kind of like my niche in it. And there's tons of different niche areas for 3D printing, but that's kind of how I got started with this whole thing.
All right, and then our guest today is Mr. Tyler Lee. He's a member of the group, and a couple months ago, I had to do a whole lot of maintenance on these Elegoo machines behind me. I print a lot, and I just kind of print them into the ground. So I got to a point where I really needed to do some hard maintenance, and Tyler really helped me out and talked me through some of the steps I needed to do. So Tyler, if you're there.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we're hearing you good.
I apologize. I was a bad Joe. I didn't check my equipment before the mission. So yeah, I've been 3D printing for about almost 3 years now. So yeah, quite a few machines, had a lot of ups and downs. So I've pretty much had to rip them all apart and put them all back together and give them tune-ups. So yeah, glad to be here. Happy I was invited.
Yeah.
Oh man, great to have you, Tyler. And sounds like you're going to have tons of knowledge and input on this conversation.
Yeah, I've been printing about 6 years. My wife actually dragged me to a library in Jacksonville, Florida, for like a 3D design printing course. I think it was like 2 nights. It was like you got like an hour and a half to make something in Tinkercad, and then they would print it for you, and like that was it. And really, the whole thing was an elaborate scheme to get me to buy her a Fullertech FT5, which is it's a big FDM printer, but it comes as a kit. Like there is nothing, like it is every screw, every wire, every little thing. She had to build it herself, and thank God she didn't ask me to help, because it was so much work. But because it was a kit, she got at the time an amazing value for this thing. Like, because she had to do all that work herself, she got what would have been at the time like a $1,500 printer for like $400 and something.
Nice. That actually helps me recall my first time getting into 3D printing. I'm an educator. I've been running a program for wow 8 years, and one of the things that I'm sort of tasked with is exposing my students to new and interesting careers and things like that, things possible things to study. And so I went to an actual like session, like a camp session for educators that where we basically took like a week and we were learning a bunch of different things, film. We had to create like film, a small film on an iPad and all these other things. But part of that session was a 3D printing intro. And this was back in, I think, like 2015, actually. So it takes me back a minute. And kind of the same setup. We had to learn how to sort of put together a 3D printer. We also had to we were tasked with doing a little design, like a game, like we had to make a game piece and then make a game based off of that game piece. So it was kind of like a creator space type of thing, a maker space. So yeah, that takes me back to about 2015 when I first actually started tinkering around.
That's cool. Yeah, I kind of gravitated to the 3D design part. I really enjoyed really it was Tinkercad. I got into Tinkercad like too much, and I started doing a little bit of freelance work, mostly for some Kickstarters that were doing board games, and so I was designing game pieces for that, and that was kind of my thrust into designing.
Wow.
All right, so brief history of 3D printing. I've got some notes here. I don't want to read all of it because it's a bit much, but it's actually back in the 1940s. This is according to Wikipedia. That was when the concept of 3D printing first came about in a short story by a guy named Murray Leinster, 1945. In the 70s was the first patent for a additive metal rapid prototyping machine. So this is the first more or less 3D printer that appears. And then in the 80s, actually it's 1980, the first patent for a 3D printer was filed. So it's been around my whole life, it turns out. Pretty cool. So
Pretty cool.
In the beginning, though, I mean, these machines were just crazy expensive. So only big companies had them, and they had them for rapid prototyping, so they could quickly create something cheaply, but it was not used for manufacturing.
Well, that's interesting because I know that kind of moving into like maybe the 90s, maybe even actually the 80s, 90s, they were taught a lot of the companies, specifically toy companies, maybe even car companies, would use some of that technology and they would call it like rapid prototyping, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I had learned that one I not too long ago, maybe within the past 6 months. I was talking to someone who was kind of industry, and he's like, telling him I'm doing 3D printing. He's like, oh, rapid prototyping. I'm like, 3D printing? He's like, no, that's what we call it. I was like, oh, okay.
So there's a guy, the guy who, and he's in the group now. Damn it, I can't think of his name. I spoke to him once. If you go back 2.5, 3, 4, 5 years on Thingiverse, which is where there's a lot, it's a repository, excuse me, of 3D files that you can download for free.
I think you got it right the first time.
Yeah. It's a terrible website.
For sure.
It's got bugs and issues, but you can usually find what you're looking for and get it for free. But there was a guy on there who was making, he wanted to do like a tabletop game for G.I. Joe. And so he made hundreds, dozens, like lots of vehicles. Yeah. Jabberwocky.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like I have a lot of respect for that guy. He did a ton of work before anyone else kind of put their foot in the door.
Yeah, I would call him like the pioneer to this GI Joe printing stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly. So, but if you want to check out that stuff, it's on there. But he was, I imagine, doing rapid prototyping. He was an industry guy. He did that as his job, and then he, I guess, come home and make. I don't want to misspeak because I don't know him that well, but just God bless that guy.
Well, he definitely helped a lot of us at least have a starting point with maybe advancing our own design. So for
Yeah,
me, he's a pioneer.
absolutely. So one of the cool things about 3D design or 3D printing is the ability to create these complex shapes that you couldn't necessarily do with a 1, 2, 3 part mold. And then you can also have the interiors can be hollow and have structure inside for support. So there's things you can do with 3D printing that you can't do from any other kind of manufacturing. For example, so I make a lot of these the weapons, right, for GI Joe. If they were to be in a 2-part mold, they can't have what you would call an undercut. Nothing that the mold can grip onto. So like a barrel hole or recessed lenses on a scope, things like that. Like a solid mold, you tear it apart when you pull the mold apart. With 3D printing, you can have all the undercuts in the world as long as you can support the print. And there's ways around it. Like if you're doing if you're injection molding with like a resin into a rubber mold, you can have some undercuts. But if like industrial, like metal mold making with PVC or whatever, you can't have undercuts. So there's some cool things you can get away with 3D printing that you can't do any other way.
Right.
So real quick, I just want to go over a couple of the different types of 3D printing. We're going to primarily talk about 2, but I do want to kind of go through the list so people understand like it's a big world. So there's stereolithography or SLA. This is using a liquid resin and then using like a UV laser underneath. So your Form Labs, Form 2, Form 3, those are SLA printers. There's selective laser sintering, SLS, and this is it's similar, but you've got a vat of a fine powder, and a laser will sinter the layers together. Put a layer of powder over, laser it, powder, and the sintering is interesting. It's not melting the particles; it's fusing the outside of the particles. So that's the difference between that and I want to say it's DMLS. There's FDM, fused disposition modeling, and that's the most common one. That's I consider Artoine my go-to expert on that one, or my wife, if she's in.
That's usually where you want to get started in this thing. Messing with the resin. I mean, which is also a good starter with the new a lot of the new machines, a lot of new printers like an Elegoo or something like that, an Elegoo Mars. But I would say FDM is probably going to be how you dip your toe in the water.
And I would argue it depends on what you want to do.
True.
So if you want to do any kind of vehicle, if you want to do anything with some real mass to it, it's probably FDM is the one you want to go with. I found FDM machines to be much more sensitive than what I typically use, which is DLP, because I can get a new DLP machine and start printing. With FDM, like you're calibrating for that.
True.
Yeah, there's a lot more moving parts in an FDM. There's a lot more things that can go wrong very quickly with an FDM printer as well.
But less mess, possibly
less
cheaper.
that for me that's the issue when I'm dealing with an SLA or anything like that. Oh my gosh, it's gloves, it's oh my god, splatter, stuff spilling, stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's why I'm in a garage. I'm in a garage and he's in a bedroom, and that's why.
I would
or an office, sorry.
I would say with resin, the work's up front to Juan's point. But the FDM, all the work and sanding and putty and mud filling, like that's all on the back end. So there's pros and cons to both. We'll get into them.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so I do want to push through a couple more of the types. So FDM, so DLP, digital light processing, has like, I imagine you guys would agree, it's an LCD screen with a UV bulb underneath, and that's what these are. So Anycubic has a Kickstarter right now for a machine called the Photon Ultra, and it's saying that it is DLP, and all those other machines are now called LCD. So the Photon Ultra, it's kickstarting. It's got all the money in the day. It's got like $2 million already, but it's different. It's like projecting the image in UV against a lens and a mirror and shooting it up. So so we might be in the midst of a vernacular change. And that thing's going to be amazing, and then all the other companies are going to copy it, and I think that's going to be the new thing. That'll be DLP, and these other things will be obsolete, and so the price will drop, which is good for us, and they'll be great. Yeah. Multi-jet fusion, MJF. It's like, this one's pretty cool. It's expensive. These are big, like a company is going to have this. If you're not going to have, it's like buying an old Xerox machine. It's the size of a Volkswagen. You're not going to put that in your, in your wife's she shed. But it uses, it's called a voxel, which is like a 3-dimensional pixel. It's almost like an inkjet printer in 3D, which is pretty cool. But way outside of my budget. Polyjet, another one, it's like inkjet, but instead of jetting ink on a paper, it print head jets liquid resin and then it like instantly cures it. But that's another one where we won't be buying any of those machines unless we hit the lottery. Direct metal laser sintering, DMLS, very similar to SLS I talked about before. And then electron beam melting, EBM, uses an electron beam instead of a laser to melt particles together like a powder.
Wow.
So there's a bunch out there. The primary stuff we'll talk about today is DLP or LCD, whatever the name turns out to be, and FDM.
Yep.
So, excuse me. So let's talk about DLP real quick. So that's what I have behind me. I'll take a look. Up. Okay. It's a pretty simple machine. It's got runs off a thumb drive. You can get like these are Mars. If you get the Mars 2 Pro, I think it's got Wi-Fi, so you can just from your computer send the file over. But it's got a vat, which has liquid resin in it, and I buy tons of this stuff. That's about $30. It's got a build plate, and so what it'll do is lower the plate into the vat of liquid. The LCD screen underneath it will illuminate and cure a layer. It'll come up, let some more resin get in there, do another layer, and another, and another, and another until you build your print. Do you have an FDM you can kind of point out?
Oh boy. Yeah, I actually have about 3 set up. I'm going to do a quick spin around. All right. So, and we can move my camera a little bit if I can stop wobbling. So please use the big beast because that's the expensive one. But sitting on top are kind of like your typical FDM printers. Those are Ender 3 Pros. And basically what it does is you can see the big circle spool. It's feeding a line through the printer through a heated nozzle tip. And then what it does is that nozzle travels a lot, and it's basically moving around and melting your plastic filament, and then it builds layers up. So that's just kind of the basics. So that like Tyler was saying, there's a lot of moving parts to an FDM printer. Yeah, your X, Y, and Z axis are just kind of moving all the time, which means that there could be some issues with that many moving parts. So just kind of giving a look, and please excuse the mess because this is my printing room and there's printing materials everywhere.
All right. So, I guess we'll talk kind of low end, high end. So for DLP or LCD, on the lower end are things like the I've got these things. They're Elegoo Mars, and they are obsolete. I don't think you can buy a new one anymore. It's Mars 2 or Mars 2 Pro. I got that brand and kind of stuck with it. The first LCD printer I ever got was an Anycubic Photon, which is like the G1 Photon, which by today's standard is pretty obsolete. And this was only 5 years ago, maybe. At the time, it was like $500, but now you can get like 3 generations newer for half that cost. So the price on this stuff is just keeps coming down, which is great.
Yeah, I think price on that new Mars 3 is like $320, I think, and that's with a 4K screen. So
yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's not bad.
So with DLP, where the line kind of is for kind of middle and high is the size of the machine. So a smaller machine like these and they're all pretty comparable, right? So if that's the build plate smaller than my hand, that's going to be about $250, and that's if you get a Frozen Sonic Mini, an Elegoo Mars, an Anycubic Photon. I think the Mono is the one they're on right now, and there's other brands, and honestly, they're all pretty comparable. They've all got parts that are almost interchangeable. Like the LCDs on a lot of these are the same, like the same. Like they've got the same. It's exactly the same piece of equipment. The bulbs are the same. What's going to be different about them is the software, the operating system that's in there, and then at the end of the day, what you slice it with might vary. I know for the Elegoos, they come with the Chidu box, which I really like, and that's what I use for any of the resin machines that I've got. It'll come with it on a thumb drive, but you can just go to their website and download it for free. But
yeah. And I know Anycubic has like their own, I think Frozen or something like that. Some people use that. But I think most people tend to use Chitu box or the like.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is slicing software on the DLP side is free. Like I've never seen a paid slicing software for this type of printing. FDM is different. FDM is kind of all over the place. But so that's the build plate on the Saturn. It's bigger than mine.
Yeah. That's optimizing your build plate.
Which can be tricky, but you get it over time, right? You can't, if you do too much, it won't work. So you gotta find kind of just the right little medium. So yeah, so we'll get into kind of pros and cons and tricks and stuff. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. So I stick with the Elegoo ABS Light Gray. This is the stuff I've had the most consistent success with. Did you just pop in, Tyler? I can't hear him. Hold on. Hello?
Yeah, I'm swapping machines.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yay. Nice.
Calling for backup.
Nice to meet you.
We are good to go.
Awesome. So I like the Elegoo resin. I started using it because I was just kind of trying everything, and I found it to be pretty consistently good, and the price was low. Since I've started using it, the price has gone up.
Yep.
And then I mix in this stuff. It's called Tenacious by Sriatech. And Sriatech, they have some good resin as well, but I'm like a creature of habit. Like there's no reason for me to switch. But this Tenacious stuff kind of rubberizes the resin. And so you put a little bit in and it just makes it less brittle. So it can have a little give. And that's like my happy spot. I haven't
Oh,
found any resin commercially that's truly ABS like really has that strength. But again, I'm also printing small things. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that Soraya Tech, and then the plus. If you can catch it when they have it in stock, you can get that 5K jug, and it saves you.
Yeah.
So you basically get 5 bottles of that size for the price of 4, if and when they have it in stock.
Yeah, that Tenacious that's a $60 bottle.
Yeah,
yeah.
I was just talking
cheap.
about like the basic.
Oh yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of brands I've been going to 3dprintinguniverse.com, and I was getting, I can't remember the name of the resin. It was something out of Australia, but it was cheap. It was gray and it worked, but it was brittle. It was like if I had something like this and dropped it, it would break. It would break like glass. Like you couldn't glue it back together. Like the only thing you could do is put like a drop of resin in there and like try and cure it with a UV light. But that was pretty sketch. But the stuff I'm using now, like I can drop the shit out of it and it's okay. You gotta put a little force on it to break it.
All right. Well, we kind of touched on some pricing. Pros and cons is there a huge difference between getting your resin and getting your FDM filament?
So it comes to the filament. So actually, when I started, I got a CR10 V3, which I love, and that's an FDM machine. That one's upstairs. It's a big boy. Like I print like a helmet on there, right? Like I can do like a full size helmet in one print. I don't have to do pieces and glue it together. I would say I'm lazy that way. This is a one piece print.
Beautiful.
And it right off that machine requires a lot of post processing because you have to clean it up. Right. But I would rather do that than piece 5 pieces together. So filament, I actually reached out to Artwan and said, what kind of filament should I get? And I don't know if you remember, you recommended the Overture stuff, which I think is actually Amazon's brand.
Okay. Yeah, I love it. It's nice.
It's consistent.
Yeah.
It's consistent. So comes vacuum sealed. This was, I want to say like $23. And you can get quite a bit out of it. It stretches. And a lot of it comes down to like how you slice your object. Is it hollow? Do you have a 5% infill, 30% infill, which is too much, but that's how you kind of can stretch the filament out. I got a bag of goodies. So like I got printed this. Like that's solid. Ouch. That's that filament. And I like to stick, like I'm again a creature of habit. Like I got the gray and I don't fool around. Like I don't switch colors. Anytime you change your filament, there's a chance you're gonna have to re-slice your thing to change the temperature, the extrusion, this, that, and the other thing. That sound right?
Yeah. It can get a little tricky with some settings depending on like really brands of filament. Sometimes the color. Sometimes, but also you have types of filament like an ABS or TPU or there's like a few different types that you're dealing with depending on what you're trying to do. Most people are going to use basically a PLA or PLA plus, which I kind of call that your standard. But
I was going to ask about that. What's the plus?
Yeah. So PLA plus is supposed to have a little bit more of that ABS-like quality. It's a little bit stronger, but you don't have to print it at such a high heat. You don't have to have an enclosure to print it.
Okay.
So with ABS-like filament, the chamber, the whole chamber needs to stay at a consistent temperature, which means you have to have an enclosure.
Okay. So my wife actually picked up one. So we actually have 3 of the CR10s now. the V3s,
Mhm.
but my wife's got 2 of them, and so she has an enclosure for one, so she can do the ABS.
Yeah.
But I just stick to the PLA because I have it working, and I don't want to mess with it. So I got I wanted to do tires, so I got TPU, and I've yet to be successful with it. But I haven't tried much either. I didn't really put a lot of time and effort into it. I know I have to turn off the what was it called? Not the extrusion, but when it pulls back up.
Retraction.
Yeah.
Traction.
Yeah. TPU, you got to print it hot, slow, and not a lot of retraction. I did.
Right. And that's perfectly it. Those are your basics for it. There's a whole, like, if you ask different people, everybody has like their own little tricks, but really no traction. I typically print maybe 5 to 10 degrees hotter than what it says. And just you don't want to go too fast at all. So even at 100% might be too fast. You want to kind of find your sweet spot somewhere in between. I'd say anywhere between 70 to 90% or something like that.
Yeah, the last one I had. So I typically print PLA depending on the brand, and again, for newbies, you can print what's called a temp tower, which will help out quite a bit. But typically 200 to 208. That the branded TPU, I ended up having to go all the way up to 230, and the print speed had to crank it all the way down to 40.
Wow.
But I was actually printing large single piece his tank treads. So yeah, it was a big piece too.
Big piece. What scale would you say that was?
It was 1/12 scale, so it was to fit the classified line. So
yeah, like we're talking about like tires.
Tank treads on the his. So like I had so I had to put it on. So I had to put it on my S5. So
that's on my. Someday I'm gonna get the time to do one of these. That's on my long ass list of things I want to do. Yeah, I look at the stuff that like Jeff Woodward and Steve's Toys and Joe Walder are doing, where they're doing these big vehicles and they're printing it in the parts in the colors that. And I see it and I just cringe. Like I want no part of that.
Yeah,
I will.
That's what I'm working on. So we're doing the Rattler at the 1/12 scale, the classified scale, and we go for the colors. So we go for either the dark blue or that Cobra royal blue, and colors aren't that bad on there. I mean, there's certain few, and I think it really has to do with consistency of the filament, like you were saying.
This is how I change colors on FDM prints. I hit it with some filler primer. I sand it. I spray it again. I sand it. I spray it again. I sand it. So so you got filler primer, and I've at this point I just use Bondo, and I think when you get the Overture, when you get these, they come with like a screen, and then they come with like a little ruler that's the same material, and I cut those into chunks and use that to kind of spread Bondo or glazing putty. Or when you get like you go to the hotel and they give you the card, I keep the card, I can use that to spread the Bondo. Or I get the credit card offers with the fake card in there.
Right.
Because once you use it, it's hosed.
Right.
But that stuff works really good.
Right. That's funny. When you pulled up the little stick, Matt, I instantly, there was a guy who's post in our group. He's like, man, I never used these. And then there's another guy who used it to cover his like desktop.
And that's what my wife told me I should do. And I'm like sitting here looking at my desk and it's gross. So it's like it's a really good idea. Just tie them on. Once it gets too gross, peel them off. Because this back is sticky, right?
Yep.
On the big piece. Yeah.
Yeah. So, more pros and cons. So, getting back to the resin printers. Um, Definite pros, like Mark was mentioning. There's different reasons why you want to jump in with the different types of printers. Uh, Mark mentioned for FDM, you're basically want to use those. If you're doing the vehicles, you want to do something that's pretty sturdy, has some durability, something you can throw around if you needed to, and it not crack or shatter. That typically you'll need that strength for vehicles. I have noticed there are a few guys who actually do some of their vehicle printing with the resin printers.
I've got
And
one.
so,
I'll be off for a second. I'm gonna grab it.
sure. And so resin printers typically use those to get a little bit more fine detail. They definitely give you, especially if you're like taking a design and you want to print and you have a lot of intricate detail. Resin printing is typically the way you want to go for smaller things. In particular, like Mark, he does a lot of weapons. The lines and the details on those weapons come through so much more crisp on a resin printer. Um, like I don't suggest doing vehicles with resin printing, but some guys do. They pull it off and it's beautiful. And it has a lot finer detail. Um, if you want to do vehicle parts or things like that, and you need that fine detail, resin printing is also a good way to go for vehicle parts or pieces if they're like smaller pieces.
Right.
Um,
Well, I think
go ahead.
no, I was gonna say I just want to echo both of your guys' point. Like I think the first question you got to ask yourself when you want to venture into this is what do I want to print? And if it is
Right.
smaller things like guns and head sculpts, absolutely resin is the way to go. And I would say until fairly recently, and like I'm one of those guys. Shout out to Jeff. He's does some amazing designs. I did the Skyhawk and I printed it on my Elegoo Saturn. Now the Saturn it's a bigger build plate. It was super hard to get for a long time. But in order to get a printer to print, let's say like a Vamp chassis, like the only
Right.
thing that was going to fit that in at a 1/12 scale at the time was a Piopoli 2XL, which is going to run you $3,000 up front and another probably $400 to $500 in shipping costs. So at that point, it's money is if money's not an object to you, go ahead. But you know, especially if you're just getting into this, again, I think if you just want to kind of tinker around and find out if this is something you want to stick with long haul, getting a Elegoo Mars, you know, like I said, 2s are out now, the 3s are coming. Creality's got, I think it's the LD, was a double 2R, which I think is down around $200 now. So there are some good printers. But again, you got to ask yourself what it is you want to do. And then once you've kind of made that decision, I think that'll kind of point you in which direction you want to commit.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the whole game. Is what is it you want to print,
Mhm.
and how do you achieve it with the desired quality?
Right.
And like, and it was you that talked me into doing the Skyhawk, Jeff Woodward's Skyhawk. So I did that on the Saturn. It's all taped up because I didn't finish painting it. So I'm not going to show it off, but I have some of the pieces. But I mean, they come out smooth. Like I don't need to sand it. I don't need to do anything. I just paint it on the FDM, and I bought one from him. Like I filler primered and sanded and went to town on that thing. And it looks perfect. Like these two things next to each other, you're not going to be able to tell which one's which. But I put a lot more time into the FDM
On the back end, yeah.
Right, but I mean, full transparency for those if you don't have a resin printer, right? So it is setting it up, it is filling the vat, right? It's fingers crossed you don't get a fail.
Well, that's either one.
I feel well, and maybe it's my experience because I've been running FDM longer, but I feel like my fail rate on resin, especially the first couple times I'm working with the model, I feel is much higher. But like post processing, like it's taking it off, it's washing it in an alcohol bath, You know, some people will wash it twice, different things, dentured alcohol, rubbing alcohol, etc. But then it's also curing, and that can present a problem depending on the size of your model, right? So it's either you're curing outside and you're hoping it's a sunny day, or you know, you have a cure station, but unfortunately, the cure stations seem to be a step or two behind the printers. They're just not as large to fit some of these new print bases. So I mean, there is, you know, a significant amount of work kind of post processing on resin. Well,
yeah, since I have the stuff behind me, I'll talk on it real quick, right? So this stuff is partially cured, and it can sit like this for a while as long as it doesn't get any light. But it's dripping in the resin, so it's got to be washed. This is a wash and cure station. So inside there's a tub filled with I use denatured alcohol. This stuff here, and so during COVID, it became impossible to find rubbing alcohol. This stuff just disappeared. And like this is 70% because that was the best I could find months and months ago, and now I don't even use it.
Right.
So I switched to denatured alcohol, and it is better.
I was gonna say same thing. I use denatured alcohol. I think it's easier to work with, a lot easier to find. Pretty much any Lowe's, Home Depot, depending on your Walmart, will sometimes have it. But yeah, 70%, like it's going to take you a long time. Like if you can get up into like 91, which is a little easier to find, but
it's coming back now.
Yeah. And you know, it tends to be, I would say if you can get the larger jug of rubbing alcohol, it does tend to be a little bit cheaper, but to Mark's point, like I think the denatured alcohol works much better.
Yeah. Correct. So the wash station, it's got a little basket. You put the thing in there, submerge it, you turn it on, and it spins it around. There you go. And then for the wash cure stations, Anycubic has one, Elegoo's got one, and I'm sure there's more. You take the vat off, you switch the mode over to cure, you put a plate down, and then it's got, you can kind of see that there's a black stick running up the back that's got two different types of LEDs in there. So two different frequencies of UV, and the plate rotates and it cures it. What I've done, because I print big and I print large quantities, is I built an arm. I designed it in Fusion, and I mounted two like large UV lights to it, and then I bought a mannequin stand that you would put a mannequin on to display something in a department store, and it just rotates nice and slow, but it's not that big around. So that's my tray, and then I've got two monstrous UV lights. Curing in sunlight works, but it's terrible. It's inconsistent. If you've got something that needs to be flat and straight, you need to give it a consistent cure on both sides, or it's going to warp.
Right.
And good luck doing that with sunlight, because it's not going to do it right there. You're going to go to bed, come back down the next day, and be like, why is this warped? It's just not as good. But so this is part of it though. If you want to do resin, because you want to do head sculpts, you want to do weapons, you want to do repo parts that don't require any post-prod or as much sanding, that kind of thing, you need to have some type of way to wash this stuff. You need to have a way to cure it. So you're not just getting the printer, you're getting other stuff too.
Right.
With FDM, that's it. It prints, you break it off of the build plate, and you got to pull all the supports and stuff off. You got to do that with this stuff too. But that's it, you're done.
Well, sandpaper, putty. There's
people that are not going to worry about it.
True.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Right. Yeah, I mean, getting started off, I don't know if someone's going to go all the way into the finishing techniques right away. Like after a while, they're probably going to go, okay, how can I make this look better? And that, to me, that's like advanced classes, basically.
Yeah. I do want to, real quick, before I forget, give some examples. So lower end DLP, I talked about Frozen Sonic Mini, Elegoo Mars 2, Anycubic, the Photon Mono. Higher end, which is basically just going to be bigger. the Frozen Sonic Mighty, the Elegoo Saturn, the Anycubic Photon Mono X, that Piopoli Phenom. It's a little more expensive, but it's a big ass build plate, which is cool. And then for FDM, there's the Creality. The Ender 3 is real popular, or at least it's pushed the most. Like you can go to Micro Center and they're gonna have stacks of those things.
Yes.
I like to call the Ender 3 the Honda Civic of 3D printing.
Yeah. So we bought one. So my wife kind of confiscated the first CR10 that we bought. She took it. And something happened with the power and it like shorted out like a week after we got it. And we bought it through Amazon. So it was an easy return. And they shipped us a new one, but like she wanted to print like right now. So she went to Micro Center, she got the Ender 3, and like she didn't even finish putting it together. She hated it. Like the CR10 was so simple to put together and start using that by comparison, the Ender 3 was not worth even finishing putting it together. She was so frustrated with it.
Okay.
She's savvy. Like she built that FT5. Like she's capable of doing this stuff, but she was so disappointed out of the box with that thing that it just went back. But there's people that swear by it.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say echo her sentiment. My CR10 S5 went together much smoother than my Ender 3s, and I have two Ender 3 V2s. Like they don't come, I would say, as put together as what the larger ones do. Especially the X and Y axes take a little bit more work on them, but they're great machines. Like I ran them, two of them nonstop for almost a month, and I never had an issue. Never had a clog. Like I said, it is the Honda Civic. Like they're super affordable. And I would say if you're thinking about getting an Ender 3, get a V2, spend the extra couple of bucks because it's got the quiet steppers in it. So like you won't hear it. All you're going to hear is the fan. But like it's a great little machine. I mean, the build plate's probably a foot square if we're being real. So not a huge build plate. So if you wanted to do helmets or something larger, you probably would have to slice them into pieces. But it's a great starter machine.
Definitely. I didn't know that there was so much trauma by putting it together. I put together two, no problem. So
okay, cool. So also low end. So the Ender 3, Elegoo has the Neptune 2, FlashForge has a Creator Pro. There's probably hundreds. There's at least dozens of different machines that are all kind of entry level and very similar. I would say if you know you're doing vehicles and you're going to eventually want to do tires and tank treads, which means TPU, get something with direct drive. So direct drive is, I don't know if it's necessarily near the extruder. I don't know what makes it direct drive per se, but effectively it's a gear that's going to spin and push the filament down into the extruder. And I'm not sure what the other feed method is because I haven't had a machine that didn't have it. But that was one of those things. It's like because the TPU is stretchy, if you're trying to push it a long distance, it's going to have too much give to effectively flow through the extruder. But if you have something close to the extruder that's kind of pulling it in, that works. That's what the YouTube videos told me anyway.
That exactly. I went over some tips for TPU. I was trying to help a buddy out, and that's what the YouTube video said. I have a pretty high-end Ultimaker 2 Plus, and it doesn't have a direct drive, but I get pretty good prints with the TPU. But I guess it's because it's a $2,500 machine, so it better print well.
Yeah, just a nice smooth flow.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I printed TPU tires on an Ender 3. It can be done, but you're going to spend a lot of time tweaking it.
Yes.
High end for FDM, I put the CR10 just because I think it's still like $400, but it's got like a 300 by 300 millimeter build plate, so it's a big size. It went together really easy. I'm super happy with it. Elegoo has the Neptune X. Anycubic has the Viper. MakerBot's got the Replicator, and like the Method X, and those are expensive, but they look really nice.
Yeah, so I'm looking on Amazon as we're going through. So you can get a CR10 V3 for $459.
Yeah,
nice.
And that's gonna. So you find an equivalent, right? Either that thing or one of the other companies is going to have a machine that's almost exactly the same. It's going to cost pretty much the same. It's going to do the same job. And if you get something in that range, you're set. Like it's going to do everything you need it to do.
Yeah.
Ugh. All right, we're down to kind of the last couple of minutes. So I want to try and see if anybody's got some good questions. Please throw them up in the chat. Yeah, we got some some folks who agree about the direct drive, like it just kind of works a little better. Yeah, slicing. Oh, let's talk slicing for the FDM. Like my wife bought, I want to say Simplify 3D, like when she started, and then that's a subscription one. So that's what we use. It works. We have it. We use it. But there's, of course, plenty other things. I think Mesh Mixer you can probably slice with, but I haven't done it.
Standard that I see most people using is Cura.
Yeah.
Now there's going to be a lot of different printers might have their own brand of slicing, especially for FDM. But I think a more centralized or standard type of slicer is going to be Cura for a lot of people. So they and they have a website. They typically upgrade their product, their slicer, and so a lot of people use that. You can use it on Ender, you can use it on Ultimakers. It has a whole list of machines that it's compatible with. So for the most part, I think a lot of people use Cura, but Mark made a point. It's kind of like the Wild Wild West with FDM. There's a lot of different slicers.
Yeah, you kind of took what I was going to say, Juan. Like the big, like I use Cura too. It's kind of, I think it's almost everybody's starter. Like it's very easy to use. Like there's a million YouTube tutorials on it. Different settings for different materials, PLA, PETG, any number of things. But I would say the other thing I like, to your point, is it's universal. So you can use it across any number of machines. So you're not stuck using a proprietary software. If you end up with, like all of us, with multiple machines, you could essentially use one slicer, slice it across all of them, just change the printer setting, slice them, and you're good to go. So.
Yes. Saves you from having to learn a bunch of different slicers too. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to share that picture you sent, but I don't have. I haven't mastered the software yet, so I apologize.
There you go, and that's what we're talking about with slicers. Say if you have one centralized or one that's an actual standard, you don't have to learn a bunch of other ones.
Yeah. So I guess we kind of didn't really even explain what slicing is. So when you've got your 3D file, think of that as an object. Every single printer is going to need it translated into how it's going to put that 3D object back together. So think of the kid in Willy Wonka that got digitized and set through the air, right? He had to get put back together on the other end. So that's what's happening with the slicing. It's taking the 3D file, slicing it into these little tiny, quarter of a millimeter or less or more layers, and then putting it back together and telling that exact machine how to do it. So if you come across somebody who's selling a file and it's already supported, like it's already got the supports built in, that's a red flag. They don't know what machine you have or how you want to slice it, what size you want to slice it. Like don't buy those. Don't do it. That is a great way to have something fail.
Right.
You gotta slice it for your machine. You got to support it for your machine. And that comes with time. You learn how to do that. Most slicers, so at least, yeah, every slicer I've used, and I've used a good 4 or 5 of them, they have a button you can hit to automatically support whatever it is you're printing. Over time, you kind of learn to do it better than the software. But it's, to start with, like, that's the way to go.
Yeah. Well, and this actually kind of brings up another point as you're explaining slicing. I had a buddy who was he had just started printing, trying to get into it, and just actually didn't understand the actual workflow in taking a design or taking a file, and how do you make this work? How do you get it to print? You know, it's not as self-explanatory as it would seem. So you're either going to have you take a file, say you get something from Thingiverse, you got a file. Now you want to print it. Well, you might need to put it on a little flash drive or whatever your machine requires to get it from the computer to the printer. Some printers have Wi-Fi where you can upload the file. Okay, but you have to first slice it and prepare it to be on to work with that printer. And a lot of people don't get that initially. They don't understand that. So a slicer is preparing it to work in your printer, so your printer understands the format in which it needs to build this piece. So you have a file, you need to get it sliced so that it works with your printer. Then you load it to your printer either with a flash drive or Wi-Fi uploading or something. Then the printer understands what it's building, and that's how it works. Some people go, well, I have this file. How do I get it to print? Why? I put it on the computer. Or I put it on the printer. Why isn't it printing? There's these steps involved. So the workflow or the flow is create a design or pull a design or get a file from somebody. Then you take that file, you upload that into a slicer program or software, which means that you're setting it up and you're building the supports and everything that it needs to print properly for your printer. Then you put that into the printer, whether it's uploading through Wi-Fi or through some sort of media flash drive. Then you select that file on your printer, and then it will print. Okay. I mean, I just think
that's the workflow. That's it exactly. Yeah.
So just kind of maybe do a sort of like a rehash on everything before we end it out. We got a couple minutes.
We have less than a minute.
Oh, less than a minute. I see.
We kind of used up the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So figure out what you want to print. If it's big, probably FDM. If it's small or super detailed, probably resin, LCD, or DLP. If it's DLP, you got to buy some other stuff, and you need a space where you can make a mess, because this stuff is messy. FDM you can get away with in your bedroom or your office, and it's not so big a deal. It can be a little loud, but it's not too bad. Cost is pretty even. Like, the cost on all this stuff is coming down, and the quality is just getting better and better. So
go ahead.
Yeah. You got anything, Tyler?
And we definitely want to thank Tyler for joining us. Our guests we want to call him our resident expert on many printers and many builds, and just that wealth of knowledge. Tyler's in our 3D printing group, and if you guys have questions about, hey, something might have broke down, how do I rebuild it? How do I fix it? Tyler might be the man to ask.
You just opened one hell of a door. I'm gonna send you a screenshot when I got 147 PMs that people. No, it's been fun, guys. I feel like very informative for people wanting to get into the hobby. Thanks again for having me on. And anytime you guys want me to pop in, or if you guys got a question, hit me up, or I got a pretty big printer coming in here, hopefully in a couple of months. And if you guys
what do you got? Oh, did you get the Elegoo?
I got the Jupiter.
Oh,
So yeah, so if you guys want to do something when we're opening up the Jupiter and getting it set up, like I'm fair game too.
yeah, we could do that. We could do an unboxing.
Unboxing. Yeah.
And we can kind of show some plate sizes, and then
Yeah.
you know, maybe we'll pull an audience and figure out what they want us to print first and give it away. That's always fun.
Sweet.
Okay.
Sweet.
Awesome. We're gonna definitely take you up on that one. All right, guys. We're a little bit over time, not too much, but again, we're gonna try and do at least one of these a month. We'll squeeze that unboxing in there, and we're gonna try and grab some of the experts from the group to bring in as guests. So I'm looking forward to it. Like this is gonna be nice. So thanks for joining us, and check us out next time.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.